Roosevelt, do solemnly swear.
I, Dwight D. Eisenhower, do solemnly swear.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution.
The Constitution of the United States. So help me God.
An article from theblaze.com. Last Sunday, January 10th, 2021, this article came out and was titled, Liberal Law Professor Jonathan Turley warns of the damage Democrats would do to the Constitution if they impeach Trump again. The article was written by Chris Enlow and it is from a statement by Jonathan Turley, and I quote, this would do to the Constitution what the violent rioters did to the Capitol and leave it in tatters. It basically, unquote, basically he's talking about once again, if they tried to impeach Trump again, which is an ongoing process. And this article was from last Sunday, January 10th. And let me go through this just to give you an idea of what Jonathan Turley is saying, which is very viable for today, Wednesday the 13th, January 13th, 2020, still viable. But when I get done with this article, I've added another article that just came out about 10 hours about Pence, Vice President Pence, and the impeachment proceedings. So anyway, once again, Jonathan Turley, a professor at George Washington University Law School and self-described liberal, warned Saturday that Democrats would damage the Constitution if they impeach President Donald Trump over the deadly riots at the U.S. Capitol last week. After the riots, Democrats and many Republicans placed blame for the violence on Trump. Now, Democrats are pushing an expedited effort to impeach Trump for a second time. In fact, according to Washington Examiner, 180 House Democrats support impeaching Trump for willfully inciting violence. Now, may I interject here once again that on my last article, I said that I'm surprised that Trump's advisors didn't foresee what would happen and have Trump head that off before it happened and tell people from the stage not to incite violence, not to do this, not to, if you're going to march on Congress and you're going to come up to Congress, then stay behind the barricades, stay out front, and all that type of thing. So I'm actually surprised that they didn't foresee that this was going to happen. Anyway, going on, indeed, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said on Friday that if Trump does not resign, the House will immediately begin impeachment proceedings against him. However, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell indicated in a memo circulated among Senate Republicans that even if the House does impeach Trump, the Senate will not have time to hold an adequate trial prior to President-elect Joe Biden's inauguration on January 20th. All these things add up. It's like, how stupid can you be on the Democrat side? According to the constitutional law professor, Jonathan Turley, and I quote, Democrats will gut the Constitution's free speech protections and its impeachment standard if they move to impeach Trump over last week's violence, unquote. Turley explained in an essay for The Hill, and I quote, the author Franz Kafka once wrote, and I quote, my guiding principle is this: guilt is never to be doubted, unquote. Democrats suddenly appear close, once again, with Turley saying Democrats suddenly appear close to adopting that standard into the Constitution as they prepare for a second impeachment of President Trump. With seeking his removal for incitement, Democrats would gut not only the impeachment standard, but also free speech, all in a mad rush to remove Trump just days before his term ends, end quote. Democrats are seeking to remove Trump on the basis of his remarks to supporters before the rioting at the Capitol. This quote from the writer of this article, Chris Enlow: like others, I condemn those remarks as he gave them, calling them reckless and wrong. I also oppose the challenges to electoral votes in Congress, but his address does not meet the definition for incitement under the criminal code. It does not. It would be reviewed as protected speech by the Supreme Court, Supreme Court, unquote. Sorry. Not only did Turley write that Democrats are, quote, now seeking an impeachment for remarks covered by the First Amendment, end quote. Let me just break in here and read the First Amendment Turley is referring to. The First Amendment reads, and this is the part of the First Amendment that refers to what we're talking about. Congress shall make no law, abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Turley explained many Democrats are guilty of the exact same accusations they are throwing at Trump. Turley continued, and I quote, Democrats are pushing this dangerously vague standard while objecting to their own remarks, given new meaning from the critics. Conservatives have pointed out to Maxine Waters asking her supporters to confront Republicans in restaurants, while Anya Presley insisted amidst the violent marches last year that there needs to be unrest in the streets. And Kamala Harris, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, said, quote, protesters should not let up, unquote. Resume Turley, quote, even as some of those marches turned violent, they can legitimately argue their rhetoric was not meant to be a call for violence, but this standard is filled with subjectivity. The damage caused by rioters this week was enormous. However, it will pale in comparison to the damage from a new precedent of snap impeachment for speech protected under the First Amendment. It is the very threat that the framers sought to avoid in crafting the impeachment standard, in that being the 25th Amendment. In a process of deliberative judgment, the reference to a snap impeachment is a contradiction. In this new system, guilt is not doubted and innocence is not deliberated. This would do to the Constitution what the violent rioters did to the Capitol and leave it in tatters, end quote, by Jonathan Turley, a professor at George Washington University Law School. This was an article by Chris Enlow from January 10th, 2021, found on theblaze.com. Now, let me bring you an article that is along the same lines, but just came out 10 hours ago as of this broadcast on deadline.com by Ted Johnson, titled, Mike Pence says he won't invoke 25th Amendment to remove Donald Trump. And now, before I bring you this article, let me read the 25th Amendment so you have an understanding. And it's a little lengthy, but if you'll listen, you'll get what I'm trying to bring across here. 25th Amendment, Section 1. In case of the removal of the president from office or his death or resignation, the vice president shall become president. Section 2. Whenever there is a vacancy in the office of the vice president, the president shall nominate a vice president who shall take up office upon confirmation by a majority vote of both houses of Congress. Section 3. Whenever the president transmits to the president pro tempore, or for the time being, of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, his written declaration that he is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, and until he transmits to them a written declaration of the contrary, such powers and duties shall be discharged by the vice president as acting president. So what they're saying here is that they have the right, if he is unable for whatever reason to do his duties as president, President Trump is more than able to do anything he needs to do, and they know it. Section 4, Amendment 25. Right? 25th Amendment. Section 4. Whenever the vice president, a majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments or of such other body as Congress may by law provide, transmit to the president pro tempore, or for a short time, of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the vice president shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office as acting president. So, once again, going back, it says that whenever the vice president, executive departments, Congress may by law provide, transmit to the president of the Senate, president of the Senate being the vice president now, Pence, and the Speaker of the House, Pelosi, their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers of his duty of the office, the vice president shall immediately assume. The vice president is saying this should not happen, is what's going on. So if they wanted to do this, it would go over to the vice president, who is saying, I don't want this to happen. So anyway, there's more to the 25th Amendment, but it doesn't really apply to what we're talking about. So going on, back to the article from Deadline.com by Ted Johnson, it reads, and I quote, Vice President Mike Pence said that he will not invoke the 25th Amendment to remove Donald Trump from office, saying that he did not think it was in the best interest of our nation or consistent with our Constitution. It's not. We just read that. It's not. Pence's office made public a letter sent to the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Pence's office made public a letter he sent to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, just as the House prepares to vote on a resolution urging him and the cabinet to invoke the amendment. But Pence wrote that, last week I did not yield to pressure to exert power beyond my constitutional authority to determine the outcomes of the election, and I will not now yield to efforts in the House of Representatives to play political games at a time so serious in the life of our nation. There's too much going on. People, back off. That's ridiculous. Pence said that the 25th Amendment was designed to address presidential incapability or disability, not a means of punishment or usurpation, usurping the office. Pelosi has said that the House will move on to impeachment if Pence declined to invoke the 25th Amendment. An impeachment vote is likely on Wednesday, charging Trump will incite an insurrection. That's today, by the way. Here is the definition of insurrection. If you don't really understand it, insurgents, rebellion, a violent uprising, usually to overthrow an authority or government. Okay, on with the article. Let's finish this up. Pence did not bring up the possibility of impeachment in his letter, but he wrote that he wanted to urge members of Congress to avoid actions that would further divide and inflame the passions of the movement. So I'm going to read to you the letter from the Vice President of the United States, to the Honorable Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and this is that letter. Okay, good. Dear Madam Speaker, every American was shocked and saddened by the attack on our nation's capital last week, and I am grateful for the leadership that you and the congressional leaders provided in reconvening Congress to complete the people's business on that very same day. It was a moment that demonstrated to the American people the unity that is still possible in Congress when it is needed most. But now, with just 8 days left in the president's term, you and the Democratic caucus are demanding that the cabinet and I invoke the 25th Amendment. I do not believe that such a course of action is in the best interest of our nation or consistent with our Constitution. Last week, I did not yield to pressure to exert power beyond my constitutional authority to determine the outcome of the election, and I will not now yield to efforts in the House of Representatives to play political games at a time so serious in the life of our nation. As you know full well, the 25th Amendment was designed to address presidential incapacity or disability. Just a few months ago, when you introduced legislation to create a 25th Amendment Commission, you said, a president's fitness for office, let me quote, Pelosi said, a president's fitness for office must be determined by science and facts, unquote. You said then that we must be, quote, very respectful of not making a judgment on the basis of a commitment or behavior that we don't like, but based on a medical decision, unquote. Madam Speaker, you were right. Under our Constitution, the 25th Amendment is not a means of punishment or usurpation. Invoking the 25th Amendment in such a manner would set a terrible precedent. After the horrific events of this last week, our administration's energy is directed to ensuring an orderly transition. The Bible says, from Vice President Joe Pence, he says, the Bible says that for everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to heal and a time to build up, unquote from the Bible. That time is now, Pence goes on. In the midst of a global pandemic, economic hardship for millions of Americans, and the tragic events of January 6th, now is the time for us to come together. Now is the time to heal. I urge you and every member of Congress to avoid actions that would further divide and inflame the passions of the moment. Work with us to lower the temperature and unite our country as we prepare to inaugurate President-elect Joe Biden as the next president of the United States. I pledge to you that I will continue to do my part to work in good faith with the incoming administration to ensure an orderly transition of power. So help me God. Quoted by and written by Michael R. Pence, the Vice President of the United States, to Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House of Representatives. I think Joe Pence says it all, really. I mean, that last part of it especially is like, you know, this country's has gone through a year of all kinds of stuff. and we're still trying to recover and still going through it. It's not only not backed off, it's in a lot of cases getting worse. And now is the time to heal. The verse that I keep saying Joe Pence. I apologize. Vice President Michael Pence has said from the Bible that there's a time to heal and a time to build up. That time is now. So that's about the best I can do for this. In that today is Wednesday, January 13th. Today is the day they're supposed to do this impeachment, and so we'll see what happens. I have to believe that for the most part, most people will not go along with this. I might just end this off by saying, if our president, if Donald Trump is impeached, he will not be able to hold office, any office, ever again. To me, that more than anything else, even if they have to make up whatever reasons they have to make up to impeach him, their whole agenda here, in my opinion, is to make sure that in 4 years, this man doesn't run for office again. Because if the next 4 years don't go well, I'll guarantee you this country is going to bring Donald Trump back as president. That's my opinion.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.
Eleanor Roosevelt, do solemnly swear.
I, Dwight D. Eisenhower, do solemnly swear.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States. So help me God.